Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, coming at you live to talk about episode 9 of season 2 of ClassicaLoid. And this was a really, really intriguing episode. I mean, it was off the wall. It was absurd from beginning to end. Shades of Alice in Wonderland toward the end, with, Beats summoning his music and having these rabbits showing up and everything. There was an absurdity to it, all surrounding and revolving around Chopin's sort of lack of faith in himself. And it's something very much mirrored between him and Schubert, which I really love, that Schubert, sort of rose to the challenge of trying to talk some sense to Chopin in this episode. We've actually seen the other leg drop in Schubert's character, where he's trying to make an appeal to Chopin when he's pointedly got the rain cloud hovering over Beats' head, and you're not sure what that's all about. There's the whole idea of round things, anything circular, anything round being, disappeared from the entire manor house. And, before we hear the OP music kick in, of course, Chopin very pointedly is shown to have eaten all the eggs, the sunny side up eggs, which are very round on the round plates, the round coffee mugs holding the coffee, all this stuff. He's getting rid of all of it, and I'm just wondering what in the hell is going on. And by the end, when the other leg drops in the story, in the plot, and it's revolving around Chopin's own, self-dissatisfaction, self-consciousness, his anxieties over being called, for all intents and purposes, a copycat artist, making the comparison between Moonlight Sonata, Beethoven's probably most known composition, versus Fantasy Impromptu, one of Chopin's greatest, melodies. The similarities between the two are identifiable if you've ever listened to both of them. There are minor similarities, but they are still two very different, pieces of music, at least to my ear. I can recognize the similarities between them, and I would not have ever really considered, if I'd heard the two side by side, I never would have necessarily thought to myself to say Chopin is a copycat. He's a rip-off artist. But people have said that. And it's a very interesting thing because it puts under the microscope the idea of the pridefulness of the creator, the reputation. It's something we take for granted this day and age, where we exist in a world where we have, remixes and edits, whether fan edits or professional edits of songs, re-edits. And there are all these different versions of songs that we can pick up with. There are cover bands, professional and fan oriented. There are cover artists on YouTube, people just sitting in front of a camera playing a song and sort of, karaoke singing along with it, and things like that. We exist in a world where there are always copies and different versions of things, and so it's sometimes easy to forget what it would have been like back in that day, in the day of these composers, where if pieces of music were composed and sounded similar, they could be accused, they could be, their reputation could be lessened for not being an originator, not being original. And it's something, I think the layperson might take for granted, because they might not, not everyone is a creator, not everyone is creative, and you always want to be able to have, the claim on the thing you created. You don't want your stamp that coincides with that to be lessened or demeaned or whatever like that. Especially when it comes to edits of songs, there are people who mash up songs, and they'll be like, wow, that's so much better than the original, sort of disparaging the originator of the original piece of music, and thus kind of missing the point. You wouldn't have this alternate edit, this alternate version, without that original. And so you should still pay respects to the person who originated the piece and things of that sort. And it makes me think of what little I know of music theory and composition and orchestration, where, like one of my favorite big band swing era, composers, Glenn Miller, the Glenn Miller Orchestra, there are certain songs that he wrote and composed that would then be reinterpreted by other, Benny Goodman and other people, Les Brown and his band of renown, where they would reinterpret these songs, and it would be a little different. It would be, for the most part, the same song, but it would be a little different. And, but that's not what is exactly going on with Chopin in this episode, worrying that Beats is going to pick up on, oh, there's such a similarity between Moonlight Sonata and Fantasy Impromptu. There aren't, to my ear. to my ear for music, you know, I can hear the little similar beats, the similarities in the beats and the melodies, but it's kind of like the bass line and then everything else, all of the other orchestration and instrumentation that is surrounding it in Fantasy Impromptu is very different. It's its own living, breathing thing. And so by the end, you have Schubert and you have Beethoven both qualifying and quantifying to Chopin that it's really in the eye of the beholder, you know, the listener. It's how the listener takes the melody to heart. That is what matters much more to these composers, you know. And that's something that Chopin should really consider for himself, rather than spending all of his wake being aware of and ever presently underneath the shadow of the master that is Beethoven. He should consider what he brought to the table, consider his own worth and what he managed to achieve, and that he is still renowned. There are Chopin fans and fanatics, people who even place his works above those of the master Beethoven and all this kind of stuff. And they really, you know, there's this really great underlying commentary. If you get past all of the absurdity and the craziness, you know, the finger pointing, they think it's Wakun who's stealing all the round things. They, you know, I'm thinking it's something otherworldly. What's going on? And all this stuff. And then Kanai's mother, Kamira, brings home croissants, and this once again instills and inspires in Beethoven the idea of the crescent moon, and then the moon proper, and Moonlight Sonata, and we hear a sort of mashup of Moonlight Sonata and Fantasy Impromptu, sections of it, segments of it put together in the song that they modernize, you know, during his summoning of the musique and everything like that. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. One of the most recent examples that I can remember in recent history stumbling across, and this is just in the last few months as of the time of this recording, that I never picked up on. I'm a big-time fan of Huey Lewis and the News, who you might most recognize as having done The Power of Love and Back in Time on the Back to the Future soundtrack. But you know, their greatest hits CD is one that has been long-standingly a must-own in my house. And so there was the Huey Lewis song, I Want a New Drug, which I guess there was litigation, you know, it was taken to court because of the comparisons between that song, the beats in that song, and the guitar riffs with Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme song from the movie, the 1984 Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Ernie Hudson film Ghostbusters. And those, again, much like Moonlight Sonata and Fantasy Impromptu, are very different. They're very different. You can hear minor similarities, and there is a mashup or two on YouTube of both of those songs with, you know, the lyrics from one put to the guitar beats of the other, and you can see how there is a similarity there. But it's kind of the same argument. It's, you know, again, one artist calling the other a ripoff, or people considering it to be that. And that never would have occurred to me because they are two very different songs. If you really parse through all of the differences and you go right down and hunker down to the beats that are similar, or similarities in the guitar riff, okay, it's kind of similar. It's kind of a similar beat and a similar vibe. But how much music, you know, think of how long music has existed, hundreds of years, in various forms and functions and fashions, and instrumentations and orchestrations and all these kinds of things, from classical to big band to rock and roll to punk to ska to reggae to all of these different genres and subgenres and all these kinds of things, subgroups within those subgenres and whatever like that. You're bound to run into songs that have similar hooks or similar melodies or similar notes. And that's kind of, you know, it boils down to that being the problem, that then it is a mountain turned into a molehill, or rather the other way around, a molehill turned into a mountain. By Chopin, his fears, his anxieties of always being cast under the shadow of Beethoven, and basically said being unoriginal, you know, being someone who usurped Beethoven's sound. And so you could see how that would antagonize and anxietize him. And all of the absurdity that ensues, it's just cushion to this very real, very meaningful dilemma that the Chopin character is, you know, contending with. And then I like at the end, because he is sort of a shut-in and everything, he goes right online and starts trolling people. Oh, well, Chopin's actually older. Did you know his, you know, blah, 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 blah. Trying to primp up his own music again, and, you know, almost making it that everything that transpired in the episode was all for naught. It was all wasted time anyway. You know, reigning inside the house, giving Beethoven his own storm cloud a la Charlie Brown from the Peanuts comic strip, where he is the only one who's solely put upon because of all of this. It was all for naught because Chopin's just going to go online anyway and tell people what for. You know? So yeah, I found the commentary laden throughout this episode to be absolutely just fantastical. I really loved that, and I think it's something that might be lost on a lot of people who are only observing the absurdity and only putting, you know, attention toward that and all the wackiness, which is, you know, that's this series in a nutshell. It is always wacky. It's off the wall. It's absurd. It's, you know, very funny and humorous and lighthearted. But if you parse through all of that, you're really going to find this ingrained, depth-laden story. This, you know, these concepts and these ideas that are very touching and heartwarming and intriguing and captivating in how they parallel the real lives of these composers and our real world. And especially as a creator, as I say. And so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 9 of season 2 of ClassicaLoid, if you've seen it as well, if you got any of this stuff, you know, from the episode as well. If it was just very cursory for you and you were just laughing yourself silly from all the absurdity, if you completely missed, if it went over your head, all of the commentary on composition and music and, you know, rip-off artists versus covers and all these things as I've outlined and discussed in this video, you know, whatever your take is on it. Of course, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. It's all about the topic of talk, talking about great shows like ClassicaLoid. And so, yeah, otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.